Fukushima #1 plant. With this reactor, we've got new information, so let me make an announcement. Well, this information there's no need for those who evacuated so far to change decisions. This information has no impact on the evacuation order so far. As for the #3 reactor, the water level has declined. At 9:05 a.m., we lowered the pressure within the reactor and we started injecting water into the reactor, and the water level increased within the reactor, and we were able to lower the temperature within the reactor. And however, the trouble occurred in the pump supplying this water into the reactor. So we switched the water source to seawater and started injecting seawater into the reactor. However, this injection was unstable in the beginning, and as a result, the water level in the reactor has significantly been lowered. So we have confirmed how the salt water or seawater is being injected, and the water level again began to rise. So the injection was unstable at the beginning and the water level was lowered so that the core was not fully covered by water, but after that we conducted a thorough investigation and we took measures against that, and we succeeded in raising the water level again. Well, there was some time that the core was not fully cooled. So within the reactor, a huge amount of hydrogen was generated. It can be expected that the hydrogen was generated, and this hydrogen could be observed in the upper part of the reactor. So it is likely that the hydrogen is stored in the upper part of the container. So as for the #3 reactor, there was a possibility of explosion that occurred for #1 reactor that we observed yesterday. So we took measures against that to prevent from #3 reactor from exploding. As for the monitoring status of the radiation level, after 10 o'clock, the radiation level remains at 50 microsievert. The radiation level was stable, but from 1:44 p.m., the radiation level began to rise again, and at 1:52, the radiation level rose to 1,557.5 microsievert. But according to the information I got shortly before, the radiation level at 2:42 p.m., the radiation level was lowered to 184.1 microsievert. So at maximum, it was 1,557 microsievert. This is just like the level of radiation for a stomach X-ray examination is around 600 microsievert. So this level, 1,557 microsievert, is equivalent to 3 X-ray examinations on a stomach. And the radiation level now was lowered to 184 microsievert.
According to the statistics, well, this is one round trip of the Japan, Tokyo, and New York, and one time is 200 microsievert of the radioactive exposure, for your information. And if the hydrogen is generated and it's now accumulated at the top of the building, well, we cannot deny that the possibility. But for some rare occasions that may trigger that the explosion like yesterday, it was just like yesterday, that it would not damage too much of that damage to the pressure reactor and the reactor pressure vessel, because the explosion takes place on the outside of the reactor pressure vessels, because the vessel is designed to withstand that much of the explosion. And if the explosive event does take place, in some rare case, that the radioactivities in the vicinity of the power plant is, as I have mentioned, and therefore there is no need of the additional measures of the evacuees, or that to the level that will adversely affect the health condition of the evacuees who are taking shelter nearby. Explosive events, or the possibility thereof, will create that the sense of fear among them, and also to prevent that array, that fear and uneasiness of the local people, that we took this measure of announcements in advance. So you mentioned that there is a possibility of the accumulation of the hydrogen at the top of the building, upper part of the building. Isn't there any ways of removing the hydrogen itself? Basically, from the building or from the reactor, from this time, the difference between this time and yesterday is that the ventilation is functioning, and therefore that basically that within the process of that removing the air to the outside of the building, and in this process this is taking place, and therefore that there is a high possibility that the hydrogen is now removed in the process of removing from the building to the outside. But for allaying the fear of the people, that we took these measures of reporting in advance. And is there the meltdown of the cores of the reactor? Well, we have to be very careful with the terminology here. A part of the core to a certain degree within the reactor is deforming. And let's say that we do not deny the possibility of the deforming of a part of the core within the reactor, because to a certain amount of the time they are exposed outside of the water. However, that the meltdown in a general sense is very serious, because the period of the time that the reactors or the core was not submerged is not long enough to come to that to the equivalent of that meltdown. My question is that exposure of the core or the fuel rods, well, the sheath melted and the fuel is exposed, and that is a meltdown to us. But there are any data proving this? I have not confirmed any data of verifying what you have mentioned. Kageyama from the Mainichi newspaper. At the beginning that you have been injecting the fresh water, and then the trouble takes place and it switched to the seawater. What kind of troubles? That the troubles of the pumps, according to the report that I have received. Order from the Sankei newspaper, that number 3 reactor of the power plant that you are pumping into the seawater, and so that are you considering that scrapping or abandoning of the power plant? When we use this seawater, it will be very difficult to reuse that plant. We understand that. That means that we have to abandon this power plant in the future? According to the report from the experts, they say that it will be extremely difficult to continue usage of the power plant. But realizing this, that for the safety measures to put into priority to safety, that we took this measure.
What's the reason that the radiation level was rising? We already vented out the air from the nuclear reactor. Because if the core is not submerged for long enough, the radiation emitted from the reactor temporarily rise. So the radiation level is nothing harmful. 1,557 microsievert, this radiation level is, for example, if you are exposed to this level for 1 hour, you're exposed to 1,557 microsievert. But, well, if you take an X-ray on your stomach, that means that you're exposed to 600 microsievert. So currently the radiation level is not harmful. So as a conclusion, I would say that this is not harmful to human health. Well, you have disclosed microsievert and radiation levels, but that is the level measured in the compound. But are you going to survey the radiation level like 1 kilometer or 5 kilometers away from the reactor? I think the more survey and monitoring will be better. I just held this news conference because I got new information. That's why I held a conference.